Thank you very much. Let me turn on my video so that um, they would know that like a lot of the things that have been said are maybe a bit too much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Sanusi Ismaila, and I like to say that I work from Colab. That's how I introduce myself, um, and that's what it is. Today, I've been tasked with sharing my story. So to keep it as real and as straight to the point as possible, I do not have notes. I'll just talk, and then hopefully, if I miss anything, we would catch up in the Q&A session. But I'd like to start the story, the Kaduna story, um, from a meeting. So I remember vividly, many years ago, say maybe around 12 12, 11 years ago. At the time, I had a technology blog called TechSuplex. And the idea behind the technology blog for me was that one day I commented on Twitter, as is always, the beginning of my problem, social media, that I did not enjoy the way technology vlogs. There's a note. Okay, can somebody enable captions? That's not me. I did not enjoy the way technology blogs captured tech in Nigeria. And someone who owned one of the most successful blogs at the time said, go and start your own if you think it's easy. So I started my own, and it became very popular. But the story starts at the point where I wrote a story about a bank's app, which at the time this is one of the first or second maybe banks that released an app. Downloaded it, I reviewed it, and it got the attention of the people who built it. So they invited me to their office. Long story short, they wanted to invest in the blog at the time, so we started having some conversations. But I remember vividly the very first um, meeting I had, a phone call. There was a phone call actually, and the person who was the CEO of the company that wanted to invest. We talked. We finished our meeting. It was a good meeting. And at the end, he was like, "Okay, so now that the meeting is over, I need to ask you this question. What are you doing in Kaduna? Isn't it that place where you people are bumping each other?" And I wouldn't forget those words because that was in the heat of Boko Haram at the very beginning, where it was expansive, and the long and short of it was that the person was asking me whether I was open to also relocating to Lagos and the like. Now to Colab in particular, Colab, like I said, is an innovation hub, and it really sprang from a couple of ideas that sort of coalesced around the same time. The first, idea or inspiration for Colab was, the fact that, and I'm just telling them as they are, not in order of importance. I'm telling as I remember them. So one of the first things was before Colab, I had an office, and my office had sort of become like a co-working space by default. My office was supposed to be just for me, and then I had one staff at the time. But at the end of the day, it got so full that I stopped going to my own office, and started working from home. Because it was a lot. But one of the thoughts that crossed my mind at the time was, was it possible to get people to pay for this? The second thing at the time, like I said, I ran a blog, and that blog involved me traveling to Lagos quite often. So I was in Lagos pretty much every month, sometimes 2, 3 times a month. Besides the fact that that was expensive, it started making me think about whether or not it was possible to have an ecosystem or a community of people who were as enthusiastic about technology as I was closer to home, so in Kaduna. That was sort of like the second idea. And then the third idea that became CoLab is at that time, in that particular time as well, there was a company, I don't know whether the company still exists, but the name of the company was TAC Assets. Same parent or same conglomerate or group where that has TAC Agro. TAC Agro is more popular. But TAC Assets had reached out to me and invited me to bring a proposal to help them build, some asset management platform, which I did. I went in, I gave them a proposal, I did my presentations, and it was done. And when we finished, the CEO was like, he wanted to see me, just on the side. And he asked whether I could speak freely, and I was like, yeah, sure. He was like, why is it that with things like construction or procurement, or even engineering services, like when you asked for, if you did like a call for proposals and you got quotes, the quotes would all be within, a narrow margin, meaning they would all be in the same band. If, it was, say, just to give a rough example, you wanted to build, one house, somebody might quote 30 million, another person might quote 35 million, one person might quote 29 million, all of them would be close. But that when it came to technology, that every single time he requested for a quote, the variation was just so much. Why was that? And I started explaining, certain things to him, like it depends on, the company and their own costs. It depends on whether they had built something like that before and they were going to modify it for you, or they're building from scratch. It depends on the person's understanding, of what the actual scope of the work was versus, what they talked and all of that. And we had, a good conversation. But it got me thinking about, because my quotes turned out to be like a lot cheaper than everyone else, but it got me thinking about why. And when I thought about it, I realized that the one thing that was different, between me and pretty much, at least as I imagine, everyone else that put in a proposal was the fact that I lived in Kaduna. And Kaduna was cheap. So I was able to pass on those costs. Like my living costs were low. And I was able to pass on those costs. Other people couldn't do that. And it sparked the idea that, was it possible to recreate that thing, that arbitrage opportunity, that, was it possible to recreate myself literally? Could I open people's minds and eyes to the idea that you could live in Kaduna but serve, markets that were outside Kaduna, and then be able to price for cheap because you lived in Kaduna, but also without skimping on quality, and also be able to charge way more than you charge someone in Kaduna, obviously, because you're charging bigger markets. Those three ideas sort of came together and were sort of like the bedrock on which the CoLab idea, was found. At the time, I was actually thinking about expansion. So I was thinking about, hiring a few people, expanding the office and things like that. But I was like, you know what? Instead of doing that expansion, I will, do a hub instead that, answers the questions, or answers those, three questions, and also allows the opportunity for people to arbitrage the system, sort of like the way I did. So when we started, which was in 2016, at the time, my focus was, like I said, multiplying myself. So we were looking for startups. We were looking for people who were, particularly in the tech industry that could work remote and stuff like that. And we did, find a few startups to work with, but very quickly, the next sort of challenge that we realized was, yes, there was some talent, but there's not enough, and more importantly, there was not enough that was ready to do what I was thinking about, or what we're thinking about at the time. So we went down a step further and said, you know what, if there's no talent, maybe we should start training some talent so that we can get them to the point where they can actually work like outsource, or build products or companies that can become like me. That's sort of like where the story started, and we've been at this for 9 years now, and it's been an interesting journey. Um, I started from that, I started sort of mid story, but I did that deliberately because I think that collab is sort of like the most important piece of all of this. Before collab, Precognition was the company that I owned, and I still own. It was the one that I used to use to build software solutions, do system design, system integration, and all basically technology consulting. That was the company that I presented, at Tech Grow, and that was the company that opened my eyes to see the opportunity that it was possible to live in Kaduna and serve the rest of the world. As the journey continued in terms of Colab, like I said earlier, when we realized we had to do talent, so we went back to do talent. At some point, there was talent. People were building interesting companies and interesting products. And the ecosystem seemed like, it was to a certain extent taking off. But then there was a new challenge. And the new challenge was sort of, no one is supporting, or no one wants to support this new companies or new talent. Capital was very scarce. The few people who wanted to invest capital, after being burnt, once or twice, typically would, hold their money and increase the size of checks that they write, meaning they would stop investing in smaller, startups, and wait for the startup to get to the point where they're ready to accelerate, or sometimes maybe raise a Series A, which is sort of like the first institutional round, or a Series B, before they enter, meaning they were cutting down their risk. And it makes sense, investment funds are typically other people's money that you're deploying, with the hope that you're able to return money to them, and give them, returns that make it worth their while. So, just from a logical and pragmatic point of view, it made sense. But I started to think along the lines like, if no one was willing to invest in the very early stage, then there'll be very few companies even that you'd be able to invest in like further down the line. That's sort of like the first thing. But then there's also the idea, and this is not something that is it's not something that people realize until I say it, and even I didn't know until somebody else said it to me, and then it just opened my eyes in ways that I had not thought about before. When you think about investments, just generally in technology, most of the investments come through venture capital. 97% or thereabout of the venture capital that's available in the whole world. So if you took all the venture capital in the whole world and you put it in one place, 97% of it would be owned by white men, not white people, white men. All right. And while that's not a bad thing, you know, it shifts your perspective when you realize that, because you start to realize that to get money, to get investments, right? Particularly VC investment, you have to look a certain way. But if you don't look that way, you have to learn or be able to talk a certain way. You have to be able to use certain terms. You have to embrace certain cultures. So when we think about tech in particular, like, the startup space, you think about, the culture, pool tables at work, sleeping pods, people wearing shorts and polo, or shorts and t-shirts. And we typically associate that to tech, but it's actually white culture. It's white male culture. It's not tech. It's culture that, was formed or founded in dorm rooms in high school and college, and, sipped into work because it was a normal thing. That's how they lived in school. That's how a lot of the companies they built, they started building them in school. That's how it became work. Again, none of this is a bad thing, but it's just, the reality of life. But then put that on one side and think about the fact that the startups that I'm trying to support um, are typically based in northern Nigeria, for Kaduna, where if you were to look at Nigeria holistically, you would say that's probably the region that is furthest away from that white culture in terms of what they believe, how they behave, in terms of the culture generally. And again, that's not a bad thing. It's just, a consequence of life. Northern Nigeria is, largely influenced by the cross-Saharan trade, so the trade across the desert, influenced the culture there. On the other side, culture is influenced by, Portuguese, British people who came, and, fact of life, just the way life panned out. So it made me realize that, first of all, on the risk side, nobody wanted to invest. But also on the culture side, nobody also would want to invest because, you don't know the person, you don't understand, how the person thinks. You just don't want to take the risk. And but then I asked myself, like, if no one does it, does that mean, or if no one wants to do it, does that mean in this life, like, there would never be opportunities? And I was like, no, that can't be. So what can I do as a person, to shift that narrative, and maybe just enough to put those people in a place where the general VC space or the global VC space is able to connect with them. So that might mean just getting them polished enough in terms of their products, in terms of their structure, to the point where they can actually receive institutional investments, or socialize them to the point where they're able to interact with, these sort of potential investors. And that was sort of like, the thought behind Aduna Capital, where, we maintain a fund that is dedicated to supporting startups, technology startups in northern Nigeria and in other underserved places, with the idea that we can take those bets at the point where no one else is taking them. And if it does get successful, then sorry about that. If it does get successful, um, then, there'll be more companies, more large companies, across northern Nigeria, and that would do a lot for employment, do a lot for, the GDP. Secondarily, do a lot for things like security and stuff like that. So basically, that is the story of me and the story of CoLab. I'm happy to take any questions at this point. I'm trying to make as much time as possible for questions so that you can tease out any part of the story or any thoughts that you want to tease out. I don't want to spend so much time talking about myself. Over.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Sanusi. So this comes from the horse's mouth. So if you be hearing Colab across the world, this is the person behind Colab, and he's saying it for you, straightforward. So I think we are inspired by your story, and we also not just inspired, we also have hope that there's a better Nigeria, there's a better future. We're even listening to you saying you're concentrating on northern Nigeria. It shows you're trying to change the narrative. I know we don't need to say too much about that, but you understand what I'm saying. And for you to try for 9 years, I think we should give you some accolades. So well done, sir. That was a good one. And so the floor is open for questions, observations. This is a time, see, this opportunity that we have, some people pay some thousands of dollars to sit down with CEOs of great companies like this. It's normal. It's not like, because their time is money. So for them being here, I think it's good we engage. And so please, the floor is open if you have any questions. And observation, please, the floor is open. I also have some questions, but I'll wait till I hear from others. So please, anyone on the call? All right, I think they understand. Okay, yes, Adidotun, yeah, please, you have the floor. Thank you. Mr. Adidotun, you have the floor. Please, can you unmute him, sir? Well, let me try to unmute him. Maybe I think he's trying to. He says my mic is not working. Okay, please try again.
I mean, he can also type the question. I'm happy to answer if it's typed as well.
Okay.
But I think someone needs to unmute him.
Someone is sorry, I didn't get that.
Can you put up?
I said I think somebody needs to unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. Hello.
Yeah, hi, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. I am Adidot Dari from SPPG. I got interested in what you're doing following Ibrahim Isa. And I'm a medical doctor. And I just want more illumination on what you do in raising indigenous setup. So I'm quite happy with what I've heard. And in every area we can provide support.
Adidot, please speak up. We can hardly hear you. Can you please speak up a bit?
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yes, far better. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, all. It's a pleasure to be amongst you. Being invited by one of the SPPG colleagues, Ibrahim Isa. And I'm a medical doctor by profession and interested in what we can do by indigenous professionals. And that's why I'm following you guys. So quite frankly, I'm impressed and happy to be here. And all the support we can have in collaboration, at least when we see people who want to support what is indigenous, we'll definitely do that. So please keep up the good work. Thank you, Mr. Sanusi.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adeotan. Thank you.
Thank you also, Dr. Adidotun. Thank you for joining us. This is quite interesting having um, other professionals from other fields join us. Thank you so much, sir. So, Mr. Sanusi, maybe let me engage you a bit. I think that would be great.
Sure.
Right. Yes, I listened carefully to your story and I'm impressed because I myself am also an entrepreneur and I know the challenges, and I've also tried to do something like you're doing, but maybe more of the hardware development part. I floated the Fab Lab before. I got the grant from the World Bank and I was able to do that, but so I'm going to still ask questions based on this now. But
Yeah.
it's been quite difficult because it's still more of, it still needs a lot of research and development, a lot of investment in research and development. So the return on investment is not there. And when you don't get grants to continue doing what you're doing, you get stuck. And I think that's where I've been in the cycle. So seeing you follow those orders, I saw the way you carefully picked, those bedrocks you mentioned, that brought the formation of Colab and others. It shows that your entrepreneurship journey. I was able to pick how, you started by writing about a bank's app, if I got that right. So that's looking for a problem and trying to provide a solution or trying to, it's still in that process of trying to find out, how best this can be, what are the issues so that I think that's like a foundation for any entrepreneur looking for a problem. And, so I was able to get that. And you mentioned about Collab starting as an idea. So of course, everything starts as an idea. Anything fiscal that we see now, work, process, anything starts as an idea. So it's a normal thing to start as an idea, but now bringing it to life. And you also talked about that you needed to create a workforce. You started just yourself. And that's another thing about entrepreneurs. I found out that one of the key ways you know, to be able to scale up or not, or in short, just to strive at that beginning part is to start with the workforce, start getting your workforce together because you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. I found that, at least I've worked with several people and I've seen that little effort of just getting somebody extra to do some, to delegate to, helped to, move whatever the business forward and all that. And so I was able to get that from what you said to, creating manpower, workforce around you, and also a community so that we share ideas, you know, tools, like for instance, let's just use the university setting, for instance, the educative setting. I'm telling you, I think I learned more from my colleagues than I even learned in school. I mean, real IT stuff programs and these things that you're using is not the Laplace or all those equations. I mean, real stuff like software. I learned most of it from just colleagues. So that co-working concept works a lot, having a concentration of like minds, and so I got that from you, from what you said too. And you also mentioned about the place of location, crashing the price. So no matter where it just says no matter where you are, just you found strength in that location. I know most times if it's normal for business, people always want to go for the least bidder. If he has the solid stuff, like if he has they just go for him. No need for stories. And so I think that should encourage us that no matter where we find ourselves, the location, we should not we should be able to find the strength in that. I also attended Covenant University. I can tell you that location, if most of people that are familiar with the Winners Chapel and all, going into the bush, I'm telling you, when we started Covenant University, because I was third set, but first, second set, the place was bushy, muddy, and everything, but we stayed there. And that place now is city, so no location is bad, just to find strength in that. And you've shown us that at least you've been able to achieve something from that process to show that location is not a barrier. Just make the best, just find the strength, and you found the strength of reducing cost for your clients and all that. So I was able to get that. And okay, you kept talking about multiplying yourself. I think that's what life is all about. If you want to create impact, you just have to multiply yourself in others, ensuring that others also get um, the opportunity. So one other thing I now picked, you now mentioned those challenges when you started of the talents. I'm also very, 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 it's a thing for me, building talents is a thing for me. I'm so consumed with passion in that aspect because I feel it's one of the keys to our prosperity.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, yeah, a lot of people have talent, but how do you unlock it? How do you unlock it? And part of what you're doing, creating that environment for co-working, Then you mentioned the capital too, bringing the capital into the place because that's another issue. People have ideas, no capital, no equipment, no the non-availability of tools to use to achieve, those aspects. So, and I can see you mentioned how you've built a lot of talents, unlocked. I'm sure you have a program at CoLab that unlocks, ideas, the potentials of talent. I want to believe so. Maybe you just talk about it a bit about your program in the CoLab. And
Okay.
yeah, so I'll finish up so that you can now. I'll still ask questions within. I'm just trying to do like a recap and
Yeah.
yes, and ask questions. Okay, so for the capital to be able to raise capital, because that's very important. And you made a great statistics here. I know I've been hearing that, in the US about the ownership of the venture capital companies. Yes, we know that. We know that the white people or the white men own most of it. And there's been some black, some black guys trying to change that narrative. But the percentage is still wide. But for you saying all over the world, it's still 97%. I
Yeah.
think that's a wake-up call. So okay, so tell me, if you look at the history of innovation, you find out that every innovation, every great innovation you see of a white man, a black man was doing it before the white man. I'm sorry to say, this is just a plain truth. From even to Henry Ford, there was a black guy already doing nice cars before Henry Ford, but capital, access, patenting, of course, that they brought, and they try to outsmart everybody by going to patent anything that comes out, even to drinks. There was one I heard, this by the side, NSC, it was a black guy that gave the white guy the is it the composition and everything, and it was just to help him to heal himself of a kind of illness. This guy took it and went to patent it and cut the black guy off, that kind of thing. And because, of course, the black guy had no access to. So I'm just showing that kind of effect it has, where the ownership of, the source of funds is coming
Yeah.
from a particular sector. So it's not helping as much. So seeing people like you trying to change that narrative, even from where you are, I had that figure of $6 million. It makes a lot of sense. That's not small money at all. It's not small money at all. And I believe in the future it will improve. And I like what you said that it's focusing on northern Nigeria. At least that's the niche for you. So I want to look at if you're looking out to, spread your tentacles to other other regions of the country. But then I just want to ask now two questions after this now. So I'm talking now based on my own,
Yeah.
yes, when I talk about the Fab Lab. So I wanted to first ask, what are your most successful startups? Maybe just give us 2, 3 examples of your most successful startups. And from those startups, do you have any startup that are based on hardware products? Like manufacturing of hardware products, because that's what Fab Lab is all about. Yeah, we have a software component, but we are more focused on building things, functional things, and that's still a place Nigeria is lacking behind. And if you look at, I always say we've done well in the software industry, very well. We have unicorn companies doing apps and all that, but when you talk about the machine itself, we really don't have, tools, IoT devices, telecom equipment. They are nowhere to be found. And I think there's a lot of inflow, effects that can come, by us, and we have a lot of people with same sound ideas. Just like we have the way we've seen software grow. All we just need is uh, that same concept of capital, the environment, the tools that are necessary. So I'm just asking, sir, that do you have uh, any startups that have done well, that are into manufacturing hardware products? And if not, what are those challenges? And how can we break that barrier? So these are my
Yeah.
own questions. But
Okay.
yeah, okay, maybe you should answer me. I thought I saw someone's hand up.
There's a question in the chat as well, which I'll answer. I'll try and
Okay.
run through.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of two maybe most successful startups from Colab, that Colab has been involved in. There's one called Sudo Africa. Sudo does cards as infrastructure. So think about your debit cards, your gift cards, your ATM cards, credit cards, all of that infrastructure that allows any other fintech or any other bank, because they actually do service banks as well, deploy cards like really quickly. They provide that infrastructure, and the cards are programmable. So if you know what you're doing, you can set limits, customize how you want the cards to be used, what time of the day they can be used, what sort of point of sales machines you want them to be used, and all of that. So that one probably one of the more successful ones. They might not be as popular because they service like businesses, so it's B2B. They have a few consumer products like Root by Sudo, which allows you as a person create both physical and virtual cards from your house that you can use anywhere in the world. So that's one. The second one would be maybe say Schoolmo. Schoolmo is a school management and measurement software. Schoolmo, as at today, is probably servicing over 300,000 students across Nigeria. They're deployed in pretty much every state. Interestingly, when you said Covenant University, the EC schools also use, that's the software they use as well. So not the universities, but their secondary schools use that software. In terms of hardware, the interesting thing is that we've actually not invested in any hardware company, and we've also not incubated anyone per se. There are a few that we've worked with, but it's never gotten to the product. But it ties down to a couple of things. One of the things is something that you highlighted earlier, which is while we might move, while we might move first, in this part of the world, there's a difference between innovating and inventing. I think we spend a lot of time and energy focusing on innovating, meaning basically doing new things or finding new ways to do things. We do not spend a commensurate amount of time figuring out how to make those new things actually economically viable. That is what, in my opinion, innovation is. Like, not just making something new or finding a new way to do things better, but also actively, making the economic making people pay for it, making it become part of people's lives. That's part of the innovation journey that I don't think we do well. The other thing about hardware is that, I mean, hardware requires a lot of infrastructure that is just not in place in Nigeria at the moment, unfortunately. You need power. You don't need, so you need constant power, but you need constant power that is also cheap. Not just constant power. You need constant power that is cheap, for manufacturing, whether light or heavy. To work, you need logistics. You need to be able to move those things, from place to place quite efficiently and cost efficiently. We don't have that, and unfortunately, you have a country like China that has an oversupply of capacity to do things like that. You have cheap power, you have cheap capital, and unfortunately, it's easier and in some cases cheaper to move, and in some cases faster as well, to move a container from China to Nigeria than it sometimes is to move that same container from Lagos to Kaduna or Sokoto. So all these things create bottlenecks that make it difficult for hardware to thrive. That said, there's still people making inroads in hardware. Interestingly, and this is just a side note, the first two tablets that I saw in my life, and this was before the iPad, before Android had tablets, were made in Nigeria. One of them was made by a company called, I think they were called Silicon Inc. At the time. They were based in Abuja. The second one, Inye, also based in Abuja. They made, Windows tablets at a time when even Windows wasn't designed for tablets. But both of them just, never really were able to commercially get it to market. There's also, I mean, the costs. Sometimes it takes a ton of money. Hardware is expensive. It takes a ton of money to build. Takes a ton of money to market. It takes a ton of money, to get it into people's houses or hands. So those would be, a couple of constraints that I see for in terms of hardware. I'll move on to the question in the chat. The first one, what is the right mindset around sharing ideas with others? So as a person, I try not to speak in absolutes. I think there are many different ways that can be right all at the same time. But my personal opinion is that you should share and share as much as you can. The reason is that sharing your ideas, you talking about your ideas in itself helps you refine your own idea, because the process of talking about it requires you to think about it before you say it. So it's an easy or more effortless way, to process the thoughts that you have about a product. That's the first thing. The second thing is ultimately whatever product or service or idea that you have would only be commercially successful if other people pay for it, not just yourself. So it makes sense that you're gathering, a lot of feedback from the people who would potentially, pay for that product. People at Colab know me. When it comes to validating your ideas, the only thing that I accept as validation is actually selling. The fact that you did a survey and 2 million people told you they would buy it based on your survey does not translate to sales. The only thing that translates to sales is actual sales, right? So I think it's important to share. I also think I'm one of the people, and I know there are different schools of thought around this, but I'm one of the people who believes that ideas in themselves are not as valuable as the capacity to deliver on those ideas, right? So if you have the idea to build a better WhatsApp, let me use WhatsApp for instance. In terms of just share features or capabilities, or even things like, in some cases, ease of use. There are many, many, many apps that are better than WhatsApp. I thought BBM was better. I thought BBM was a better implementation of chat than WhatsApp. And then, there are a few others. I think Messenger is actually pretty decent, as an alternative to WhatsApp. There's one that's really popular in the Middle East that we used here for a while. I cannot remember the name right now. It escapes me. It looks purple. I also thought that was better. If you look at like the Asian or Chinese implementation, things like WeChat, I think they're better. But the fact that the idea itself is good or better does not necessarily translate to wider acceptability. It doesn't translate to people liking it. It doesn't translate to it being the best thing. An idea is only the best thing in your head. It's typically never. It's not the case outside of your head. It is the capacity to take that idea and turn it into something that people would literally change their lives, alter their lives to use, to accommodate and use. That is where the real value is. So if you have a million ideas that can each make $1 million, but then you do nothing about them and you die, then nothing really happens. If you have no idea at all, but you're able to listen to other people's ideas and actually deliver on them to the point where they're successful, then that is where the value is, in my opinion. So I think sharing, keeps you on your toes, keeps you honest, pushes you to implement, really quickly, and get feedback. So I think people will steal your idea anyways, one way or the other, and it's never really your idea. Anytime you're thinking about something, there are probably a few thousand people that are thinking about the very, very same thing that you're thinking about. And I've had those sort of cases, which is why, like, at CoLab we have a no NDA policy, because we cannot sign NDAs, because chances are the thing you want to sign an NDA before, we've heard about it already. So if people steal your ideas, I think that's fine. If your ideas come from, if they're yours and they come from a place of, you were inspired to them, then you're thinking about it not as one thing, but you're thinking about the whole picture, and no one can steal the whole picture from you, right? So that's what I think about that. So when it comes to pitching to investors, how can you best protect your ideas or deals to ensure that you don't lose ownership or control? Again, wrong person. Some VCs actually would sign an NDA. But the thing to realize is that ideas are not, I know, like, there's a patent system that muddies the waters, but ideas in themselves are usually not worth so much versus, an actual implementation of the idea. So for the most part, an investor wouldn't even give you money for an idea, because the investor does not know that you have the capacity. I do not invest in ideas, and I do not know anyone who actually does. Maybe grants, you would give you money for an idea sometimes, but even there, I think, are shifting away from that. You need to be able to demonstrate the capacity to implement that idea. So take the idea to, a minimum viable product, or some version of the product that actually does work, even if it's, even if it's not all high tech, but you need to demonstrate that it's viable. So typically, if you just have an idea, you can talk to investors, but the chances that they would give you money actually very slim. So I'd say focus on getting, demonstrating something. So because, again, say you're a medical doctor, I would use an example. If, for instance, you have an idea that can cure cancer, it's a great idea, but except maybe the most riskier story, if it's a really small number that would not is a rounding figure for a VC, they typically wouldn't touch it, right? But if you demonstrate, say that I've done some clinical trials, even if it's on mice, and these are the results, these are the adverse effects, these are the contraindications, these are all of that, and then you put it in front of someone, then someone is now able to better assess the risk that's involved in giving you money, right? So at that point, they probably would say, oh, you know what, let's sign an NDA, you should go patent this, all of that, because even they want to benefit from, the implementation of that idea. Investors, for the most part, don't go about stealing people's ideas because, they, they have work to do. And they know more than everyone else that it takes a lot of hard work to go beyond an idea to a living version of that idea. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, so that answers question, Doc. The question I think is the question is from. Oh, okay. Sorry, it's from okay. Mr. Didotun. Hope that
Yeah.
yes. All right. Thank you, sir. I was able to pick your ideas are not what as much as the implementation. So it's whoever implements that takes the crown. So I think that's one part, and I'll connect this now to my earlier question, and the point I'm making about hardware development. I heard what you said about those issues, those challenges, of course, which is very true. It requires a lot of infrastructure, constant and cheap power compared to likes like China. But it's allowed in the world we are now. It's allowed for you to mass produce products in any other country that's cheap for you. So it's allowed. But at that point of developing the idea, what happens? Where you can, and I think that's where the creative gap is in most of us. And that's one of the things, hardware development. In short, that's one of the things Fab Lab is created to break at the beginning, because it starts with empowerment. Like, you have an idea of how a shape should, sorry, a model of an object should be. Then you just design it and send it to the printer. It prints it out in your face. It takes that barrier that you can't create something.
Yeah.
So I think if we start then from the empowerment that, okay, there's some little machines you can use, from that empowerment level, at least at the basic, that you can do something, extra from what you used to know, then you now start the real education. And I think this way also that will build the talents that we need. A lot of people, you see young guys coming up with a lot of gadgets, using rubber slippers and all that. If they're given the right tools, I'm not saying mass produce now, we're even still talking about, because you said something that I picked, and I've seen that pattern, and we can't blame you. You said you don't invest in ideas. So I think you want to take it to that next level of POC, proof of concept. Like the last class we had, it was talking about the minimum viable product. Even that POC. So how do you even get the POC? How do you hardware product? How do you even show what it can be? So that's where the hardware development is coming from. Using just as simple tools as 3D modeling tools, printing tools, to be able to do that. And it's becoming cheaper anyways, because you have, if you compare the cost of 3D printers, back in the day to what it is now, you have a lot of desktop printers that you can almost still start something. So I'm still saying it again, sir. What are the issues, like the issues apart from the cost and everything, to see that? What are you looking out for that, or what would inspire an investor you know, to be able to invest in hardware products. At least you've been in this cycle of, you know, investment rounds and all that. So what can it be? Even if it's just to even develop, create like labs. Maybe you come together with some of your venture, you know, other guys. So let's even create a lab where it will be easy for young people with ideas to be able to build their product to even proof of concepts. Then they can take the design outside the country and you know, mass produce. Then over time, you know, bring in those machines in there, because that's the only way we can take over the manufacturing space. China did it. China, we're talking about, did it, you know, got machines from all over the world and still, you know, doing reverse engineering and all that. Then another thing is the education. Investing in education and hardware development. Maybe that's the level we should even focus on more now. If we are talking about that, the infrastructure is a bit expensive, let's even invest in the education. And that's where I'm trying to bring out something now. That's where we've been working behind the scenes with Mr. Roberts to have this industrial automation training, where people are taught how to, you know, make gadgets using microcontrollers and all that. Then, of course, the 3D printing to come up with, you know, products. Like you said, cancer, you can create a cancer imaging device, you know, that would have a software part, hardware part, and no. So I'm just saying that this kind of I'm just saying that it's also an opportunity that even if you're not looking at the real gains now, investing in dedication in that aspect, I believe it still has its, you know, future gains.
Yeah.
Just to conclude this, I was watching an interview of I think it's a minister from Taiwan, one of the ministers, something from Taiwan, and he said, you know, they're a country without any resources. What they invested on was education, ensuring that 90 something percent of their, it was saying that 90 something percent of their population can read and write. So I'm just saying, investing in education, and so we have that platform. Anyways, we'll be looking forward to collaboration with you, and these leaders. You are the expert in the in getting capitals. If there's something like that, I see the truth. In my own little way, I've trained few people, like I've given them opportunity to have those tools, and I know what came out of it. Like they became something else, you know, creating solutions for industries and all that. So I think we should give it a chance, even if we start at the level of empowerment and education. So thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I mean, I hear you, and you know, maybe I should just, you know, quickly respond, uh, you know, to your comments.
Yeah.
I think there's certain things. I would say that while I think the first thing to say is that there are different types of investments and there are different investment vehicles, right? And VC, for instance, which is sort of like my first, and I even tell, you know, people that because we're even trying to do something different. I don't think VC is the best model for a lot of the growth that we need to see in Africa, right? I think, you know, we need on our side, and it's an ongoing conversation. We need to innovate on you know, even the investment side and the thesis and all of that. But there are certain things I want to first say, you know, before I you know, respond, is that it's not as if Nigeria does not do any hardware at all. I I think we do some hardware, and some of them, you know, sophisticated to a certain level beyond what you think. So I'll give you an instance. Um, there's a place in Kano, I do not remember the name right now, where what they do, right, is fabricate machines, manufacturing machines for industry, for agriculture, um, and things like that. And typically, what they do is what you alluded to that China does. Somebody goes and buys one from China, they bring it there in Kanu, They break it apart. They see what board is inside, what parts are inside, and then they locally fabricate the part, replicate the board, reprogram it, and start to build it. A lot of the low-level rice milling machines, even the automated ones, for instance, are built that way. So there's that. There's also someone in Lagos that has been exporting computers across sub-Saharan Africa. And it's an interesting model as well because they buy condemned phones, they take the boards out of smartphones, repurpose them for computers and as used computers, and they sell. If you went to Alaba Market, for instance, and you wanted to buy what they call a fake LG TV or a fake Hisense TV, they're built in Nigeria. Like, I mean, they might import, a bunch of the components, but they are built in Nigeria. So it's not as if there's no hardware at all. But the thing to think about is that innovation in itself, right, is a function of what a market needs. Whether the market knows it or not, there has to be that latent need, for a product. I do not think that right now that the labs that exist, particularly the hardware labs, or try to exist, focus, and this is a general problem even across Africa. I do not think that they focus on those needs. I think a lot of time and effort right now today is spent replicating things. So let's use 3D printing as an example. We have 3D printers at CoLab, so it's not something that is I'm saying out of a lack of experience. But you teach someone how to use render, or teach someone how to do a 3D model. They 3D print a clock, a mug, a couple of things. But no one is thinking. I mean, I've seen at least a couple of cases where people are actually using 3D printers to build hands or limbs for people who lost their limbs to Boko Haram or something. That is a good use case. There is a demand for that. It solves a problem. Are people 3D printing things, agricultural parts? Probably not. Are they printing, so there's a use case, right, where it becomes useful. As of today, lots of 3D printing that happens is not efficient because you're better served using a plastic mold to do the same thing. It's a lot faster, it's a lot cheaper, it saves so much time. But is that to say there are no use cases for 3D printing? No, there are plenty of use cases for 3D printing. However, we're not focused on them, we're not surfacing them. And it's not the investor's job to surface them. If I had personal money, I can say, out of the goodness of my heart, take this 1 billion naira and deploy it to a lab. Let's see what happens. But investor money is investor money. It's like a bank. People give you money in trust that you're going to make investments, and that at the end of the day, you might lose some investments, but at the end of the day, you are net positive so that they can get returns. And you don't get net positive by taking risks on things that are not, I mean, there are certain things that the economy is not ready for, or do not exist in the economy, but the economy is ready for. And as a result, you can deploy capital so that by the time the product or service is ready, the economy is also ready, and then you can reap the rewards of being the first mover. But then there's also not spray and pray, meaning there needs to be some deliberate thought into deploying capital. It is probably why you're not seeing a lot of investments in that space, particularly because some people in the past have invested and didn't get any returns. So people sort of like shy away from. Money follows like the market, right? And that's where I would stop.
Yeah, thank you so much. I got that. I got that. And you're right. Anyways, I think one of the missing aspects of this is the market needs that people are not focusing on. But fortunately, some of us have been able to look that way because of still the training. If we have this kind of, like a startup kind of training to, groom the startup from your hand, like what are those essential things you need to look at as an entrepreneur, as a startup? You have to ensure that you get the market needs and all that. And a lot of people are not doing it. So this is still based on that education, that holistic education that we need to give. I'll give instances of what we've done in our lab and how it aligns with the market. Let me use one practical one now that is happening to us in Nigeria now that people don't know. In the power sector, I don't know if you watched when the power generating companies met with the president recently.
Yeah.
And Kola, or is it Kola or additional, the Sahara Group MD, he said something, and I've read it over and over again, going around power generating stations, meetings with them, and all that. Now, one of the issues is part replacement for the power sector. I mean, the equipment and the plants and all that. So he mentioned it that that's one of the things that's taking the FX away. And also, okay, getting the FX is one thing. That's one thing. Shipping it in the lead time is another thing. And it's just like we're giving money to those outside when we can fabricate it. Then there's a big fabrication industry in Nigeria, but it's next to quackery in quote. There's a wonderful one, fabrication, welding, there's even an association and all that. But if you look at it, you just have one welder, you won't use the specifics, you won't use precision, you just weld one thing and just gone, And so the efficiency of the machine will not be as much as it is. And that's what 3D printing is solving. And myself, luckily, I'm into that too. I'm doing something with Shiru power plants. I was able to get them a 3D printer. So now a lot of parts, plastic parts, just a stop, this stop cock, they call it, just to stop the fluid to move from one part. It shuts down the whole system. And because those plants are probably were installed in 1970s and all that, the parts are hard. And when you tell the machine guys to do it, they're doing something that, like I said, is not that precise. And since we installed the 3D printer for them, which has capacity at least to instead of printing carbon fiber, they are now solving that problem. And I can now say, based on what Kola said too, and even a lot of other directors I've been able to talk to. So I'm just saying that kind of use case, that just on its own. Then also using metal 3D printers to also build those, some of those heavy parts, even in gas engines. I'm talking about something that we know that is doable. We're not talking about maybe science fiction. Something that we have companies, OEM partners that we just want to bring their product in and see what they can do. So the heavy industry is $1 billion industry, and even in Nigeria, heavy industry, welding, fabrication. So one can come in with that so that's one use case. We've also done, even for education, I think one of the best ways to educate someone is through, visualization.
Yeah.
Building shapes, sizes, all kinds of body parts to teach children goes a long way. So people can come up with ideas of educational kits, that they can easily print, 3D print, and tune it out there. Start with some niches, go from one, just like you did, you start engaging companies one by one. And all. I'm just trying to say that there's still a future in this aspect. There's one that we did.
Obviously, definitely.
There's one that we did too that is very critical, that we worked with the biggest robotic, as in the top robotic, health robotic company in the world, manufacturers in the world. She did this global challenge, and one of the groups was in partnership with a Chinese woman and a Nigerian. So they came to Nigeria and they were looking for fab labs. The idea they had for training, okay, the concept was to find best ways to train surgeons that work on the bones.
Yeah.
So the concept from the 3D printer is print out these bones, then use it as training. Not so you're not just you'll be able to hold it, you'll be able to mark it before
Yeah.
the surgery, you'll be able to do that. And that team was able to get $400,000. Able to make was able to make sorry about that. Was able to
Next. Yeah.
Yeah, was able to make $400,000, at the end of the day. So I'm just saying there are many use cases that if we are given the opportunity, to come up with an holistic design on how we can get ourselves, the hardware manufacturing, components in the country, take it to the next level. Because the thing is, digitalization has helped so much. Those machines, the processes, the software, they are there. So I think that education empowerment is very key. I know I accept that you said there are many investment vehicles, that VC is not the best for this now because it's investors' money. They'll be waiting for their return on investment. But I think we should also I think there are grants and all that can propel this sector. As an engineer, that's why I'm also passionate. So
Yeah.
apologies, because one of our duties is to be able to design and manufacture, build things, not just be service providers, because many of us are service providers. That's just the truth. And so
Yeah.
development in the digital space, development of hardware products in the digital space, give an opportunity for that leap, that leap step. So I don't want to bore us with too much talk, but I hope you get what I'm saying. So I
Yeah.
think the hardware, what I'm just saying in essence, that the hardware, development aspect also needs a lot of attention, a lot of support. And so I think when they now all come together, software and hardware, I think we are ready to stomp the world. We have the workforce, we have the brains, we have the raw material. See, raw materials are another. I also want to talk about the raw material is another thing entirely. The raw materials they used to make all the filaments,
No,
like
people produce that in Nigeria now.
yeah. So that's coming up. So that's a big value chain too. When you look at PLE, the PLE is like one of the most common materials, polymer materials for 3D printer. That's a polylactic acid, biodegradable. Across the world, people use corn. Corn is the main thing, but you find out that cassava has even more starch for that kind of. I'm just saying. So
Yeah.
so we have all the resources. We even have the corn itself. So when you talk about the other materials used, we have the deposits here. So that is also under value chain. That's in that industry that that we can explore.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for the time.
Not a problem.
Yeah,
Happy to be here.
yeah.
I'm just
Thank you.
wondering if there are any other questions because I know we'll soon close out.
Yes. So I think the comment there is well understood. Thank you, sir. The implementation is the main work, not just conceptualization alone. The big picture will always be retained. So the implementation, we've gotten it. You just have to do it. Just have to do it. So thank you, sir. Any parting words, sir, before we close?
So I mean, pattern words would just be a couple of things that that I would maybe want you to just go back and think about. The very first one is tied to what we just finished, which is Q&A. I think as Nigerians, oh, okay, there's also another question which I would answer. After as I do my part into it, I think as Nigerians we ask too few questions,
Mm.
and it's a problem.
Very true.
The reason why it's a problem is because questions are the mechanism by which we think.
Mm.
So when you're alone with your thoughts, you're actually asking questions. You don't say, in your mind, You don't say, oh, I'm walking, I'm walking, I'm walking, I'm walking. There's a stone. Mm-mm. You're like, okay, I want to get here. How's the best way to get there? I see a stone. Is my foot going to hit the stone? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? My head aches. Am I ill? That's how we think. We actually ask questions. So asking questions is sort of like an exercise for your thinking. The more questions you ask, the better you get at asking questions. And conversely, the better you get at thinking. I think we're a society that doesn't ask questions, and as a result, um, we don't think as well as we should. So, first thing is just, about asking questions. The second thing, that I would want people to think about is the fact that while we're all products of our environment, what we define as our environment today in 2025 is very, very different from what it was in 1990 or even in the 2000s. Your environment, the thing we call environment today, is actually the whole world. So while there might be latent challenges around you immediately, those challenges do not necessarily hold you back. And I think my life is sort of like a testament to that. Like, from Kaduna, we have built software for global companies. We've done projects and programs for global companies. We have engaged with people at the high. I remember the first time we had this project with some people from Stanford University. I was so awestruck, like Stanford, like the almighty Stanford. But I left not being impressed. I thought the people that we had, the people around me, were better thinkers or better solution, and basically did all the work. The people from Stanford didn't do anything of note, which is not to say the university is bad or anything, but that experience in itself just told me that we are built for a lot of things. So I think that it is super important that we stop to give excuses around the place that we live or the environment or the government and all those things, and just get up and do. The life is biased towards people who take action. And taking action isn't an easy road. There'll be a lot of disappointment, there'll be a lot of failure, but you have to just have it in you to get up and keep going. And I think the last thing I would say is that that's sort of like food for thought, is that in the history of the world, it's always taking very few people to change the course of the whole world. It's never many people don't have to come together for even to change the world. If you think about the two world wars, there's very few people that caused them and caused the world to go up in flames. If you think about even the economy, even if you think about the current global economy, not Nigerian economy, the current global economy as a whole, is one person that is basically dictating by the things they do or don't do, that are causing like the shifts, with tariffs, with immigration, things like that, and all the rethinking around what a country really means. All of that is just one person. So I say that to say that many times we underestimate how much latent power, for lack of a better word, we have to change our environment or to alter the course of things. So we all have it in us, and it's something that we should exercise a bit more. So to round up, what is my advice to budding innovators? The same advice that I give entrepreneurs. The most important advice as an entrepreneur or innovator is do not die, right? as long as you're alive, you can keep going. And as long as you keep going, your chances of success, will continue to improve mathematically or statistically. So, over an infinite time scale, if you keep trying, you would become successful eventually. So the one thing that would stop your success is that you have finite time, meaning you would die at some point. So don't die, just keep going. Thank you.